Hello, everyone. My name is BRYAN CHE, and I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Huawei. I'm also a director on the Eclipse Foundation Board of Directors, and it's my pleasure to be able to speak with you today at EclipseCon. So I moved from the US to China several years ago to work for Huawei. And when I moved there, there were a number of digital technologies that I encountered, which were both very new to me, but also very fascinating. And I want to call out just three in particular that have suddenly become hugely valuable in this era of COVID-19. The first thing that happened was when I first moved here. So I live in Hong Kong and work across the border in Shenzhen. My apartment in Hong Kong has not one, but actually three separate fiber optic drops for connecting to broadband internet service. And for just about 20 euros a month, I get 1 gig up, 1 gig down, no bandwidth restrictions, and that also includes my full TV service. So I was just incredibly amazed by both the speed as well as the low cost of the broadband internet available to me. And of course, with everyone stuck working from home, this has become incredibly useful. The second technology which I encountered was just that there's this amazing delivery logistics system here in China. You can order pretty much anything that you want on a phone for pickup and delivery, and it can be done in just a few minutes. And it's not just to your residential address or to your office, but basically you can summon delivery from anywhere you are, just standing with your phone, and within just a few minutes, a delivery driver will come up to your phone's location, and if you want to mail a package, you just give it to them and they'll send it off. If you're ordering just a drink, they'll find you on your phone and they'll deliver it within just a few minutes. But the delivery logistics, which is entirely mobile enabled, is really incredible to behold. And the final thing here on the right is that basically China has gone just about cashless in terms of adopting mobile and digital payments. So here you can see this is just a street vendor on the street selling fruit. But everywhere you go, people put up these little QR codes. Here you can see I've highlighted in yellow. And you can just scan this with your phone and you just pay for anything with your phone, whether it's online e-commerce or whether you're just buying fruit on the street. Everything is basically cashless. And of course now, as everything is moving to try to involve as little human touch as possible because of COVID, this has also become incredibly valuable. So it's been really interesting just to see the rise of digital technologies, but also how increasingly important they've become during this era of COVID that we're all living in. Now, one of the things that's been interesting about digital technologies and is that we all know that this has been largely driven on the backs and infrastructure of cloud computing. So I want to just give a little bit of background in terms of what's been happening from the public cloud market behind the scenes with all this digital technology. So first off, I'm showing you two different snapshots from the China cloud market. The first one in 2017, the second one 3 years later in 2020. And I just want to call out a few different highlights. The first is that you can see that the cloud market in China has been growing tremendously fast, about 800% over these last 3 years. The second thing is that if you look at who are the market players in 2017 and in 2020, this has changed quite a bit. So actually Huawei entered the China market in 2017. So you can see that we weren't in the market yet at that time, but the leaders were Alibaba, followed by a number of smaller companies. In 2020, after just 3 years in the market, Huawei has overtaken the second position in the China market, and the rest of the market has also started to consolidate around the big technology giants in China, including Alibaba, Huawei, Tencent, and Baidu. And so you're starting to see a consolidation around the cloud market in China, similar to what sort of happened in the US market maybe about 10 years ago. Now, one of the big drivers of cloud computing over the last year or so, and this is not unique to China, but really around the world, has been the fact that everyone is doing remote work now. This has also been, one of the recent factors for a lot of the growth at Huawei Cloud. So just as an example, at Huawei, we have a enterprise collaboration SaaS called WeLink. We actually rolled this out back in January of 2017 as our internal enterprise collaboration platform. And then it so happened that in December 2019, we publicly released this for customers to be able to use and started bringing this to market. And as fortune would have it, just 1 month later in China, the COVID-19 epidemic started striking. And so as a response to that, one of the things we did at Huawei was we made WeLink available for free for any business with fewer than 1,000 people to use. And this has driven tremendous adoption of WeLink. We've been growing 50% daily with over 1 million users per day signing up to the service. We have over 10,000 healthcare centers and hospitals and government departments and so on this. And this is not just WeLink at Huawei, but really across the board for every kind of video and collaboration software suite. This has been a huge driver in terms of cloud adoption, both in China as well as around the world. Now, one of the things that may surprise you then, given the fact that I've talked about some of these advanced digital technologies I've encountered in China, as well as the rapid growth rate of public cloud in China, is that China is actually one of the laggards in deploying cloud. And it's along with a lot of the European companies cited by Gartner as actually lagging in their adoption of public cloud. If you look at sort of the leaders, that includes obviously the US, but other countries like the UK or Canada or Australia and so on. And you actually find China along with most of the European countries sort of in this lagging adoption of public cloud. And so I think this is one of the key factors that we can start to take a look at is, when we think about what is going to be the future of digital technology, given that we live in this COVID-19 era, is that we're going to start to see a big change in sort of these kinds of adoptions. One of the biggest drivers of this adoption of digital technologies, including cloud, is that when you look at the big geographies around the world, they're starting to pour in tremendous amounts of investment into digital, both to try to recover from the economic shock of COVID-19, but also because we recognize that we need to invest in new digital infrastructure if we hope to have any sort of meaningful recovery as we go forward. So for sort of this new normal of living that we're in. So for example, in China, there's this new infrastructure initiative by the government, which is a multi-trillion renminbi project over the next few billion years to invest in digital infrastructure. Similarly, in Europe, earlier, just a few months ago, the EU Commission announced their next generation EU project, which is investing hundreds of billions of euros into Europe to try to invest in digital technologies, both for recovery as well as to advance the digital capabilities of Europe for its new economic needs. Now, I think this is going to be a huge factor in terms of how do we start to think about what are going to be the key new technologies and the evolution of these technologies as we go into the next several years, both in terms of dealing with COVID, but also as we think about, what is this recovery and investment going to look like? Now, one of the things I wanted to highlight is that, there was a McKinsey study earlier this year, which highlighted that for the top companies that are starting to see business success around digital technologies actually have 3 key differentiators around them in terms of, what is helping them to be successful. The first one that they called out was open source adoption. And in fact, they said that in terms of the top quartile of companies in terms of their business success, with open source being a key indicator of you being in the top quartile, they were able to achieve 4 to 5 times the business efficiencies compared to the companies in the lower quartiles. So a huge business return and business efficiency advantage by adopting these technologies. The second catalyst was public cloud adoption, and this was a hugely strong indicator of developer velocity and how quickly you are able to create technologies, especially for those who are non-software companies. And then the third big differentiator in terms of companies who are in this top quartile of digital companies was that fact that they are leaders in starting to explore and implement artificial intelligence technologies. And I think this is a good sign because, with the fact that Eclipse Foundation is moving to Europe and the fact that this is EclipseCon Europe, I wanted to take a quick overview in terms of these three trends and what they're looking like over Europe in the next few years, especially with this EU infrastructure investment, and take a look at what's happening across these three areas from an investment standpoint. Now, starting with open source, which was the leading key indicator in terms of digital success for the top quartile companies in the McKinsey study, this is where I think that Europe is actually very nicely positioned to be able to take advantage of this kind of technology innovation over the next few years. First off, I think that Europe is starting to become one of the key open source centers, not just for its region, but actually across the entire world. On the left-hand side, you can see I've taken a screenshot from the European Commission's website, where they actually call out open source as a key strategy in terms of how the EU Commission wants to start to invest in IT services and software solutions. And I think this is a really good move, and it speaks very well for the potential future of these digital technologies, because we all know, as attendees of this conference, how critical open source is to the pace of innovation, as well as to shared collaboration when we start to develop these technologies. And of course, I also believe that the Eclipse Foundation becoming a European-based organization is also a huge move for helping Europe evolve to become one of the geographic focal points of open source in the world. With the Eclipse Foundation being one of the top open source foundations in the world, I think them locating into Europe to be able to provide a local hub here for global open source technologies is also going to be hugely beneficial for the digital ecosystem that starts to develop across the EU and Europe more broadly. The second key area which was mentioned was the adoption of public cloud in particular, not just cloud computing in general. And here we've seen that Europe is starting to invest in this new GAIA-X initiative, which is focused on how to build a federated open data and cloud infrastructure with European values and using European infrastructure. This was initially kicked off by Germany and France, and now is also incorporating as a new foundation headquartered in Brussels. And I think that this is going to be one of the key ways where Europe is starting to be able to develop its own indigenous cloud infrastructure to really be able to power how it starts to be able to do digital innovation. And this is going to be really critical for both Europe's recovery, but also its innovation, because as we saw, public cloud adoption is a huge driver, especially for non-software companies in terms of developer velocity and digital efficiency. So the fact that Europe is starting to strategically invest to build out a European open-based cloud infrastructure is going to be hugely important. At Huawei, this is very much in line with how we take a look at cloud computing. If you recall, earlier I mentioned that Huawei, we first entered the public cloud market in 2017, and in just 3 years, we were able to rise to the number 2 position, and we are the fastest growing cloud in the world today. And a big factor in terms of how we were able to so quickly build was the fact that we built on an entirely open architecture using open source software throughout. So on the top left here, you can see this is our overall strategy in terms of how do we build out our cloud. First off, we build our own hardware, so everything from data center infrastructure to power systems to chipsets, networking gear, and so on. We make this widely available for anyone to be able to adopt and use. And so this is our open hardware strategy. We do not restrict our hardware just for use in Huawei Cloud, but we make this available to anyone who wants to use it anywhere that they want to use it. On top of that, Huawei Cloud is built entirely using open source software, throughout the stack, whether that's, OpenStack at the infrastructure layer, CNCF and, Kubernetes at the container level, as well as a number of homegrown open source projects for everything from databases to AI services. Huawei Cloud is built entirely using open source software. And this usage of open source has been one of the key factors for how is it that we've been so quickly able to grow, because instead of having to build everything from scratch, we've just been able to join the community and start to contribute and start to gain from open source. And in fact, on the bottom, I want to talk just about the container space because there's perhaps no hotter area in cloud computing than containers right now. Huawei is not just a user of open source, but we are actually one of the top contributors to open source globally across a whole host of different projects. So in the container, we are by far the leading contributor, both in China and as well as one of the top 4, overall globally in the world. And we've also initiated and contributed quite a lot of our own open source projects into this space. And I think this has also been a big factor for why in the China market, we are not just the number 2 container platform, we're number 2 overall from cloud, but actually if you drill into the container market, Huawei Cloud is actually the number 1 container provider in the overall China market. And so open source is a huge driver in terms of the adoption of cloud computing. And we're very excited to see that GAIA-X and open source is becoming foundational to Europe's adoption of cloud computing as well. And here at Eclipse Foundation, one of the things that we're excited about is that Eclipse has such a strong focus on this cloud edge integration. And this is something that the EU has called out as well, because a lot of the value, especially in the European industries, is going to live at the data coming from the edge, especially with Europe's strength in industries such as automotive and manufacturing and so on. And so Huawei, we're one of the founding members of the Eclipse Edge Native working group, and we're very excited to be partnering with them to build out the overall Edge Native ecosystem. And in addition to that, we've also open sourced and contributed a number of other open source projects of our own. So this includes things like KubeEdge for bringing Kubernetes into Edge deployments, as well as Edge Gallery, which is our open source MEC platform. And so edge computing is also a key way where we see open source evolving, both as a European strategy, but also in open source, and especially here at the Eclipse Foundation. So we talked about open source, we talked about cloud computing, and the third pillar that was called out in the McKinsey study was around AI, where early adoption of AI is a strong indicator of being in the top quartile of digital performers. And here again, we're very encouraged to see the big focus on AI technologies across Europe. One of the things that the European Commission has been working across Europe is starting to fund a lot of EU-wide and European-wide artificial intelligence projects as well as platforms. One of the most notable is perhaps this AI for EU project, which is focused on how do you build an online AI platform providing all sorts of on-demand AI services in Europe and for Europe. And one of the things that we're especially encouraged again by is the fact that this is being done in open source. So here at the Eclipse Foundation and in open source, of course, this is a big focus for us as well. And this is something that we at Huawei are hugely focused on supporting as well. I just want to call out 2 different initiatives that we've been leading. The first is that we've been working with the Eclipse Foundation to sponsor the creation of a new AI Open Lab. This is focused on how do we bring into the Eclipse Foundation the ability to be able to run a European Eclipse-based infrastructure building and assembling AI-based platforms so that we can start to take all the different open source projects that are out there, provide tested distributions to make sure that they work across all the different providers in Europe that are out there, and to provide very valuable software services and data available for the entire European and open source global community to be able to take advantage. And this is something that we're very excited to be working with Eclipse on. If you're interested in this, we highly encourage you to get involved with this. The second thing I will highlight is that at Huawei, we actually have a rich set of different AI technologies, everything from our own NPUs that we've developed, different hardware, all the way to different software and cloud services. So a really strong end-to-end AI stack. And we've been open sourcing this as well. One of the key projects that we've open sourced is an AI framework called MindSpore. And this is especially targeted at different workloads for things like federated learning, which is a great way to be able to preserve privacy, as well as to be able to share AI models between things like edge and cloud and different devices, and to be able to protect your data across all these different deployment tiers. And so we believe that this project is also very strongly aligned with a lot of the key European focus on AI implementations and AI strategy. And so we're very excited to be able to work on MindSpore and integrate this with Eclipse and the overall European open source ecosystem as well. So we welcome you to join us in the MindSpore open source project for AI as well. Now, it's not just these longer term projects in terms of building huge European projects for AI that we think this is going to play a key part in. But actually, even today, we're starting to see that AI is playing a big role in helping address a lot of the challenges we see in this COVID-19 situation. One of the things that Huawei has been doing is we've actually been working with a lot of our partners and customers here in Europe, including AGS here in Italy, where we have built an AI-powered diagnosis system that can be deployed mobily into the field. And this is using Huawei hardware and software to aid in COVID-19 diagnosis. One of the key benefits of this is that compared to the previous deployment, which was manual with doctors, we were able to decrease the diagnosis time from over 20 minutes to under 2 minutes. And also we were able to increase the accuracy from doctors working alone to doctors working hand in hand with the AI system from about 90% to over 98% accuracy. So a huge assist from using AI technologies to enable COVID-19 diagnosis. I'd like to share just a short video now to show you how that works in action.
CT image diagnosis is a powerful tool for analyzing and containing coronavirus as the global fight against the disease continues. CT images are a vital part of coronavirus screening and early prevention, but traditional image analysis was too slow to keep pace with the surge in cases. Hospital admissions were increasing exponentially during the initial outbreak. Manual diagnosis of a patient CT image was taking 15 to 20 minutes and was imprecise. Huawei worked with Yitu to invent an intelligent diagnosis system for analyzing CT images with AI. The new system shortened diagnosis to 2 minutes with an accuracy of over 98%. The solution uses the Huawei Atlas 800 inference server for computing power of up to 512 TOPS at Int 8 to concurrently analyze 512 channels of HD videos. One server deploys within half a day to arm frontline health workers with rapid AI power. Time is of the essence in a crisis, and delays are fatal. The AI diagnosis solution has helped hospitals in Italy, Poland, France, and Mexico to save lives by making diagnosis fast, streamlined, and simple. Ascend to pervasive intelligence.
So Of course, this is a terrible situation that we're all going through right now with COVID-19, and it's very unfortunate that we're not all able to meet in person in Germany right now. But as I mentioned through my talk, I think there's reason to be optimistic, especially when we take a look at the investments into digital technologies, both in Europe, but also globally, and especially around these areas where open source is going to play such a key role, but also open source combined with cloud and AI. And the fact that we're starting to see these as sort of the target investments area, in Europe, I think portends well for the future in Europe. It also portends well, for the future of the Eclipse Foundation and open source, given how strategic open source is going to be hosting these new developments and how well positioned the Eclipse Foundation is going to be able to take advantage of a lot of the new developments here. So this is one of the reasons why we're excited to work with the Eclipse Foundation around these areas in Europe, and why we're still optimistic and hopeful in terms of what is going to be coming ahead. And so, I'm very much looking forward to next year, for hopefully, we will have recovered significantly from the situation. Hopefully, we'll be able to meet in person, have a beer together next year, but we'll also be able to have some really exciting conversations just about the role that open source and cloud and AI and all sorts of new technologies are playing in shaping this new era that we're living in. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the time that we've had together in this event. And now I'm happy to take a few questions. Okay, so the first question I see coming in from the chat is, any specific ideas about how to convince companies to dedicate more of this post-COVID recovery money to open source? So that McKinsey study, I cited, I think is a good, resource where if you take a look at the study, this actually focuses on business performance and taking a look at the top quartile of companies. They have 4 to 5 times the business efficiency of other companies, and open source was actually one of the 3 strongest indicators of what made them different from the others. And so I think that this is one of the key ways to be able to promote the adoption of open source. The second thing I would mention is that as you take a look at all the different technologies that are being built in open source, open source is really the key innovation driver across every single industry today, and especially given how quickly we'll have to move, especially given open source being naturally tuned to distributed development, where we're all sort of different parts of the world. I think the development model of open source is highly, highly suited to this COVID situation that we're in as well. Another question is, what factors do you see from COVID-19 that fastens the current transformation? There's a few, and I think I mentioned these in my talk. But first off, I think a lot of us have been forced into these situations where we're working and much more dependent on technology. This is whether we're dependent on video conferencing and collaboration solutions, whether we're dependent on digital payment solutions, shipping, logistics, all these different things which are powered on digital technologies have become increasingly important, as we try to cope with the limited human interactions that we have today. And I think the other really, really big factor is that when you take a look at things like the EU funding, when you look at the China funding, when you look at US funding, there's a huge amount of money that is being poured into digital investment, both as a way to stimulate the economy to recover from these big recessions that we're in, but also recognizing that digital technologies are going to be the key innovation drivers as we go forward. So with all this money pouring in, I think this is a good time to take advantage of, how do we start to invest in these areas to start to recover, but also to transform our industries. Last question I can take here. Mike mentioned the Eclipse Foundation had new servers in Switzerland. Are our servers also in Europe or China? So if you take a look at our Huawei cloud, for example, we have servers, around the world, and we also have labs around the world. This includes physically in Europe, as well as physically in China, as well as many other parts of the world. We are also working very strategically with the Eclipse Foundation around the new Switzerland-based infrastructure. So we're very excited to host some of our open source projects coming up in this Switzerland-based infrastructure with Eclipse as well. So with that, I think I'm out of time for my session. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a good rest of the conference. Thanks a lot.